County. Right now, we're going to hear from Caroline Sarnoff, who's the Assistant Director of Data Outreach at Measures for Justice, which is a new organization that is about measuring justice at the county level. So this is an entirely new organization that's starting to actually kind of look at 3 or 4 different categories at each county, and we'll be able to produce that kind of data and have that data available to folks who are looking for how do you measure justice at the county level. So Caroline, there you are. Yes, very excited. Thank you very much.
So I'm here, as Joanna said, to tell you about Measures for Justice, which after 5 years launched its online data portal at the end of May. Prior to launch, we spent many, many hours reaching out, talking to the practitioners and the stakeholders in our states, meeting with the prosecutors, the state court administrators, the public defenders. And then we also spent some time after launch engaging media groups and journalists on how to use this data. And really, our next big frontier is how to engage people like you. Okay, the community organizations, advocacy groups, everyday citizens who care about what's happening in their community. My hope today is that you'll see this data and you will use these data-driven measures as a catalyst for a conversation about change with your prosecutors, okay? This is a tool to hold prosecutors to a new level of transparency, a new level of data sharing, and then I hope you'll use this data as a catalyst for a conversation about what is working and what's not. So how we got here. Measures for Justice was founded by Amy Bach. She's our executive director. She wrote a book called Ordinary Injustice. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend. And in this book, she talks about an unmet need, which is a need for numbers that tell a story about what's happening in our country. We talk a lot about our criminal justice system, but let's be real, it's not a system, it's 3,000 plus systems. And they all operate with their own autonomy on some level and their own elected officials. And we don't have a way to tell what's happening at the county level. Also, we measure everything, right? We measure our hospitals, we measure our schools. I live in a tiny community in rural New York, and I get a 12-page summary of my drinking water every year. But I'm a criminologist. I have been for 15 years. I couldn't really tell you much about what's happening in Westchester County and our criminal justice system. So what do? We collect individual level data. It is an obscene amount of data. We go into a state. Every single adult criminal processed for a period of 5 years, from start to finish, we collect that data. That takes us many years and lots of road warriors who go county to county requesting this data. And then we analyze it. We put it through a system of 32 core performance measures, which I'm going to show you. And then the final step is compare, share, and act. What's really unique about Measures for Justice and puts us in a good position to provide you reliable data is that we are not an advocacy organization. We are a nonpartisan, neutral data group. Okay, so we do not advocate for certain reforms. We're not about left. We're not about right. We are really about criminal justice data and getting us to a point where you can access it, because it has been historically very siloed by the agency that owns it. So the measures, I'm going to show them to you in a little bit, but I want you to explain what you're seeing once we start diving in. The measures look at the entire system, okay? One of the issues with criminal justice data is we tend to really narrowly focus, right? We'll say, oh, there's an issue in this state with this agency, with this group of people, let's do a 4-year study into it. And then you might miss sort of the big picture of what's really happening from start to finish. So we look at the whole thing. We're going to look at everything from crime and arrest to collateral consequences post-conviction. And then every measure is going to talk about one of these 3 goals. Okay, so is the measure addressing public safety in the community, fiscal responsibility, fair process? Are people of different groups being treated equally from start to finish in the system? And then a little bit where you can see this data. This is sort of the big question. So we just launched, right? End of May. You can go online today for free, sit down and look at all of this data for these 6 states, okay? Washington, Utah, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. We are currently expanding right now to Arizona, California, Illinois, and Missouri, and that's with the generous support of the MacArthur Foundation. And then we recently announced Google.org and Chan Zuckerberg are funding work in California in our expansion. I mention these because people are getting it, okay? When Mark Zuckerberg and Google.org are investing in a tiny nonprofit to data mine criminal justice data, people are understanding there's a real need here that's not being met. We have a couple, people always ask, like, who came up with the measures? It seems really overwhelming. How do you keep evolving? Why are the measures iterative? We have several different councils that are truly made up of the brightest and smartest minds in criminology, former heads of BJS, Bureau of Justice Statistics, former head of NIJ, Vera Institute of Research, judges, econometricians, anyone you could want talking about this. We've generously been able to get them to come on board and help advise us. So before I show you the data, I just want you to understand sort of the process to get the data in there, because one of our biggest arguments is that it's just too much, right? Like, it literally cannot be done. If it could be done, the federal government would have done it already. And, you know, they're right. It's a lot of work. We get data from prosecutors' offices that are handwritten on steno pads, and we transcribe them in to figure out caseloads and stuff like that. We clean and code this data. We audit it several times before it's ready for the data portal. If anyone wants to visit the data portal, I'm going to show it to you right now. You can navigate there at measuresforjustice.org. So I'm gonna dive right in here and start showing you what you can do with the data, because, like I said, my goal is that you will leave here and you will start using this. So you basically just go here, you would click on Data Portal. You're going to get a map of the states that are available to you. And as you hover over a state, it's going to tell you just some general things. So in Wisconsin, we were able to populate 23 of the 32 measures we created. Pretty good. The years that we looked at, you'll notice that the years here are 2009 to 2013. It's great. We're going to keep on adding. So, you know, if you see something here, our goal is every 2 years to add another set of 5 years of data so people can sort of monitor changes and patterns as they start implementing new policies to address what they find. I'm going to show you Florida today, so I know we have several people from Florida. It's an interesting state. And so when you would click on Florida, you're going to get a list of all of the measures that are available to you in Florida. Just some general housekeeping on how you would navigate the site. You can look at measures by stages. So you could say, I'm really just interested in maybe pre-trial measures, or how about case resolution? You know, I think John was saying, I've got no information about guilty pleas. Well, here, you know, you could keyword search. I think you also, maybe you want to talk about bail. You can say, I just want to know the % of people who are in jail because they can't come up with $500. Keyword search bail. So you can navigate on keywords. You could also say goals. You could say, I'm really interested in things like disparity. Let's look at some fair process goals. Since this is a conversation about prosecution, I'm going to pick some measures for you that I think are going to be really good about illuminating some trends at the county level as far as prosecution. So let's do cases not prosecuted, okay? So what cases not prosecuted is saying, it's looking at the percentage of cases referred to a prosecutor by law enforcement and prosecution declined to move forward. Okay, so this is could be before. This could be like a null, just a no prosecution, or it could be a formal, null pros after case filing. If you want more information, the portal's for everyone, right? So you shouldn't feel like I can't look at this measure because I don't really understand what it's talking about. There's a long definition. It's going to explain to you the utility of this measure, what it's trying to do. It's going to let you know the calculation, any exclusions. It's going to tell you how we defined it. So this, for Florida, we're including cases only which charges were formally referred to the prosecutor, and they are captured in a court database. So once you navigate here, you're going to get a heat map, okay? So by county, the darker counties mean higher percentage of cases were not prosecuted, okay? I personally like the bar graph view because it's going to tell you what the state averages, and then you'll be able to see which counties are sort of falling above and below. One of the things I love about the data portal is that even though these graphs and the tables are super data-driven, it's really user-friendly, okay? So all you need to do is sort of scroll over a county, and it's just going to tell you sort of in plain English what's happening there, okay? So in Bradford County, 33% of cases referred by law enforcement were not prosecuted. So, you know, they're a little above. So what I would do like this, so say I'm you, I'm looking at a measure, how do I use it? I would pick like maybe 9 counties, okay? So let's pick like 3 at the top, maybe 3 that are right at the state average, and then let's choose a couple at the bottom. And when you do that, the graphs down here are going to populate for you, okay? I mentioned there was obscene amount of data. It is all here. Like, someone just like raise your hand, like, I want to know what that is. I will show it to you. It's all here, okay? But what I want you to look at is this percentage, okay? So this is telling you in each county the percentage of cases, right? So we can see we picked the top, you know, high percentage, all the way down to Monroe. Now, typically, what's cool about this is it's showing you another measure right here, cases dismissed. Declinations and dismissals are things that really should be looked at together, right? Typically, you would like to see more declinations than dismissals because it's showing you at an earlier stage, the prosecutor is taking some time to review that case and deciding, it's not a great case, or there's not enough evidence, or the guy's not guilty, I'm not going to move forward. Case dismissed might imply little more time has been spent, right? That maybe they're sitting in pretrial detention, who knows? So typically you want to see higher declination than dismissal. So what I would do is I would take this measure and I'm going to click on cases dismissed, which is going to drive the measure by the counties that have the highest dismissal rate. So you can see right here, Gilchrist County, 50% of their filed cases ended up getting dismissed. That is high, okay? The state level, 16% of cases in the state of Florida get dismissed. 50% in Gilchrist, okay? So I'm going to add Gilchrist to our map here. And then I'm going to go back to cases not prosecuted so you can see where they stand. And basically what I'm showing you is I want you to look at how these numbers compare, right? So 50% of cases dismissed. They're leading the whole state. 13% not prosecuted. That's an interesting finding there. Maybe those numbers would be flipped in an ideal scenario. And then if you just wanted to sort of say, but are the counties similarly situated? Should I even be comparing them? I would encourage you to scroll down and compare all of this information, okay? If you want to know about population, we're talking about urban versus suburb. Okay, let's see which counties here are similarly urban, which counties are similarly rural. How about young male population, one of the few proven correlates of crime? Have you ever tried to use UCR data? Oh, good luck. It's right here for you, nice and pretty. Property crime rates by county, violent crime rate by county. Talked about those clearance rates remaining stable. Clearance rate. If it's blank, it's telling you that county's not reporting to UCR. Maybe you should talk to them, the police chief about that. Criminal justice resources. How many law enforcement agencies are in a county? How many full-time law officers? Poverty indicators. We talked about elections. Is this county Democratic? Or do they vote Republican? And then if you just wanted some more, you could keep scrolling down, which is a massive undertaking, not available really anywhere else. It's the legal context, okay? So every measure you're looking at, there are a set of laws and statutes and rules that govern the ability of this measure to make sense, okay? So it's going to tell you, how do you clear a criminal record in the state of Florida? Are there circumstances where a conviction record might be expunged in Florida? Yeah, here's all the statute to tell you about it. What are the collateral consequences in Florida? Well, you could lose a driver's license, suspend a driver's license. The next thing I want to do is I want to show you the kind of final and coolest thing about the portal, which is every measure you can filter. Okay, so we talked about fairness. Let's see what this measure looks like when we compare white and non-white defendants. The numbers are suggesting something really interesting here, which is white defendants have their cases declined for prosecution far more often than non-white defendants, okay? And in Jefferson County, that ratio is nearly 2 to 1, okay? So you could look at all these counties here, you could knock it down, you could say, I don't really care about Monroe and Santa Rosa, I'm gonna click them out, but you know what I wanna see? I wanna see what Miami looks like, you know, so you could, let's add Miami in here. So here we are looking cases not prosecuted, filtered by race, really seeing a disparity favoring the white defendants there for declinations. If we wanted to see racial disparity with case dismissals, you would, again, click on that to change this graph and have that drive the measure. And then all of a sudden, we're noticing that non-white defendants are having their cases dismissed more than they are declined. That suggests something interesting. And then sort of what's the next step, right? So what we're saying is now you have a tool, okay? From not the local government, not a university that's funded by the county or funded by the state, but a neutral, nonpartisan, rigorous designed data set that you can take to someone and say, listen, let's have a conversation, okay? I looked at the data. I noticed your declination rate is 50%, and you're declining mainly white defendants. Let's talk. And that's really what we're hoping will happen. There are some other interesting measures here when it comes to talking to prosecutors about what's happening. You know, we've been seeing, I'm going to clear these filters. This is interesting. This is looking at the resisting arrest cases not prosecuted, okay? So the only charge for an arrest was resisting arrest, which has always been a little paradoxical to me. But anyway, so then we're saying, okay, you've been arrested for not wanting to be arrested. No harm, no foul. Is the prosecutor then going to charge you with resisting the arrest that you didn't want to be arrested for? And you can again filter this, okay? So let's see what the deal is. And what this is telling you, that if you are white in Leon County and you're charged with resisting arrest, your prosecutor is not going to move forward with that case by a pretty large, that's a 3 to 1 ratio in Leon. And Leon's not a little place, you know. Leon's got almost 300,000 people living in that county. What about charge reductions, right? So we've talked a lot about pleas and this idea that you might not be guilty, but they say, you could go to trial, you could risk 7 years, or you could plea and I'll reduce that charge and we'll agree on 2 years. Let's take away the filters. So this is saying that in Florida, 11% of guilty plea cases had a charge reduction. Some counties, as high as 25% of the people pleading, are doing so with the understanding that going to trial means they're probably going to go away longer than if they just say okay at that point in time. You could filter this by other things, right? You could filter this by offense severity. So is there a difference between felonies and misdemeanors in the way things are playing out in the county? What about attorney type? If you have a public defender versus a private defender, is your case outcome going to look the same? Offense type, well, is it a drug charge or is it a felony charge? You know, is it a domestic violence charge? You know, what's the difference there? So there's all these different ways you can filter this. We're going to keep looking at race. Well, charge reduction more often than white. So this is interesting. So this is in charge reductions are for. So in Monroe County, non-white defendants had a charge reduction more often than white defendants. but it kind of goes the other way too. You know, in Lafayette, we're getting white defendants out of more. So the disparity here isn't quite as, you can see the actual disparity for the state here, 1.01 to non-white. So those are some examples, and you know, I would just challenge you to spend some time to go in here, look at these core measures, click around, and push forward with data as a tool to support what you're finding. Because if you listen to the experts in this field, if you listen to John, you'll know you're not going to get anywhere without some numbers and some data. So best of luck, and thank you again for having us today.